Hello all and welcome to another 1 vs 2. Now, when Nintendo opened a ballot for who could be a playable character in Smash 4, I really hoped it would be Bayonetta, and I actually voted for her, so I was thrilled when it turned out she had won it and is now a playable character. I got the special edition for Bayonetta 1 and 2 on the Wii U on release day, and subsequently got the first print edition because it's pretty. So I've been planning on doing a 1 vs 2 for the two games for a while now, and seeing as Bayonetta is now playable in Smash 4, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to compare the games.
Normally with these videos they're divided into categories, a point is awarded to whichever does that category better, and the game with the highest score is declared the better game. Thing is, both games are so similar in so many ways, I could only think of 3 categories, which was pathetic, so I'll go through those, but then I'll go down the X-Men Legends comparison route and just talk about both games. I'll try and slightly organise it in some way and award odd points for certain things, so hopefully the one I prefer will end up with the highest score, but if not, I'm sure I can rig it somehow. I should probably point out this is purely looking at the Wii U version of the game, not the PS3 or 360 versions of the first one. It doesn't look like a whole lot was changed, just a few extra costumes and stuff, but I'll be looking at those later. I'll be referring to them as B1 and B2 just so I don't have to say the word Bayonetta every 15 seconds. So, where to begin looking at these games? I guess the plot would be a good place, but first, a little backstory. Originally, there was only one realm of reality until it split into 3, Paradiso, Inferno and Chaos, with us being in Chaos. Humans were unable to see the world as it truly was, so artifacts known as the Eyes of the World were bestowed upon the Lumen Sages and Umbra Witches, so they could oversee mankind as it evolved and ensure balance is kept. Lumens draw their power and are symbolic to light and Paradiso, whereas witches are the dark Inferno counterparts. It is for this reason relations between the sages and witches was forbidden, as this could upset the balance, but of course it eventually happened and a child was born, Bayonetta, causing a war between the factions. Although the Umbra Witches won the war, the only remaining Lumen Sage manipulated humans to hunt down the remaining witches. Bayonetta was sealed away for 500 years until she was uncovered by a journalist 20 years ago. She doesn't remember her past but has possession of the right eye of the world and tries to track down the left eye. This is what the first game revolves around and is also where things start to get batshit crazy, but I'll try and simplify it so it makes as much sense as possible. In your travels you come across Cereza, a young girl who thinks Bayonetta is her mother, and she follows you around. You fight angels, that's right, all these things are angels, and when you defeat some of the more powerful angels, such as Fortitudo and Temperantia, I could have picked one of the easy ones to pronounce, they mention Jubileus the Creator shortly before being dragged into Inferno. From this point I am issuing a spoiler alert. Cereza is Bayonetta. The last remaining Lumen Sage is Balder, Bayonetta's father, and the Eyes of the World are not artifacts, they're people, and the power comes from their memories, somehow. Balder is the right eye and Bayonetta the left, but in order to uncover the power, Bayonetta had to remember her past, which is why Balder sent the younger version of Bayonetta to the future. Cereza is eventually returned to her own time, but this affects the future as events during the game prevent her from being sealed away, causing her to retain all her memories and thus be able to awaken as the right eye. That allows Balder to release Jubileus the Creator to reunite the Trinity of Realities, which would bring our world to an end, so you have to kick her ass, and the battle is awesome. Spoilers over. There are other aspects to the plot, like fellow Umbra Witch Jean and what happened to Bayonetta's mother Rosa, but with the way it throws so much at you, it can be difficult to keep up and piece everything together. You may travel from place to place, but I had no idea why I was going there. Anyway, now we head to Bayonetta 2. The balance of the Trinity of Realities doesn't seem right, and one of Bayonetta's infernal summons manages to break free, kills Jean and attacks Bayonetta. Jean is dragged into Inferno, so Bayonetta decides to bring her back. There's a mountain called Fimbulventa somewhere in Europe, which has access to both Paradiso and Inferno, so you head there. That's about it really, so much simpler and easier to follow than the first game. well, until you bump into Loki and things start to go batshit crazy, but generally stay fairly straightforward. He's heading to Fimbulventer as well, and as he knows the area better, he agrees to be your guide if you keep him safe. A younger version of Boulder is brought into the present by a mysterious being. The being promises Boulder revenge on the person who murdered Rosa and sends him after Loki.
Mate, headed to that witch's party? Not the best costume I've ever seen, but she doesn't seem like the picky type.
And now, once again, spoiler alert, Loki is able to manipulate time and help you travel around. The mysterious being is Lopter, and he and Loki were once one being, Aesir, a godlike entity that watched over mankind from the top of Fimbulventer, and it was his eyes that were the eyes of the world. When he bestowed them upon the witches and sages, he split himself in two, Loki and Lopter. Loki accidentally transports Bayonetta and Boulder back 500 years to the witch hunt, and it is revealed that the younger version of Lopter was the one who killed Rosa, and this is where things go even more batshit crazy. Future Lopter wanted the power Loki has to control the eyes of the world. Seeing as Boulder and Bayonetta are the eyes, he wants the power back so he can rule over our reality. Lopter gets all his powers back, which returns him to being Aesir, so it's his ass you now have to kick. Loki uses his latent power over the eyes to destroy them, severely weakening Aesir and allowing you to defeat him. He tries to go back in time to before the eyes were destroyed to try his plan again, but he is absorbed by Boulder, who is also sent back in time. There's a post-credit scene of Boulder who has been corrupted by Aesir, which sets up the events for the first game. Though, hang on, seeing as Boulder was the right eye in the first game, how is he able to be the right eye if Loki destroyed the eyes? Boulder was a Boulder from the past brought to the present, and then after the game went back in time, but he wouldn't suddenly become the eye again, even though events of the past which happened in the future were transferred back to the past and...
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
I don't know, anyway, no more spoilers, but as you can see, things get a tad complicated, especially when it starts doing all the wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey stuff, and it can be difficult to keep up with everything that's going on. Even so, on the whole, while both games have decent plots, I've got to give the point to Bayonetta 2, seeing as it may be a relatively simple plot to begin with, which gets more complicated later on, just like the first game. For the most part, it's all a lot easier to follow.
Come on, love. You think I'm just gonna tell you my secrets when I don't even know whose side you're on?
Next up is the supporting cast. While most of the games are spent with Cereza or Loki, there are other people who pop up regularly. I'll start with Luca. He's the son of the journalist Antonio that found Bayonetta. When he released Bayonetta, he was killed and Luca saw what happened, believes Bayonetta is a cold-hearted murderer and wants to use his father's notes to track her down and get revenge. Of course, by the end of the game, he realises the truth about what happened, which I won't spoil. In Bayonetta 2, he's a friend and ally, so appears every now and then to help out, though he doesn't seem to appear as much in this one as he did in the original.
Please, take me there. I remember. I remember everything. I have to hurry.
Are you nuts, kid? We need to get you patched up.
Although, hang on, let's back up a tad. Seeing as the events of B1 prevented Bayonetta being sealed away, why does Antonio stay dead? If she was never sealed away, she wouldn't have been in the lake for Antonio to find, and so he wouldn't have been killed. So why does he stay dead? We'll probably never know, but next up is Jeanne, fellow Umbra witch and childhood friend of Bayonetta, but it's her that sealed Bayonetta away. You fight her a few times in B1, and as you have to save her soul in B2, she doesn't really have much of a part until quite late in the game. She could have been an awesome character, but she's not fleshed out enough and not involved enough to make me really want to know more. Then there's Rodan. He owns a bar called the Gates of Hell, and he's the person you buy stuff from using the halos dropped by angels you've defeated. This is the guy I really want to know more about. He's a fallen angel and creates the weapons you can buy, as well as having other trinkets you can use. He's an absolute badass and is probably my favourite character. I'd love to see a spin-off game for him so we can see more of his backstory. Finally, we have Enzo. Oh dear, they really ballsed this guy up. He's mainly there for comic relief, which is fine, but it's so forced and poorly done, it's just awful. Nothing he does is remotely funny. I suppose he has one line that's okay.
You know, she's pretty hot for a dead chick. You wasn't a big fan of her shit when she was in the realm of the living. But looking at her now, nah, still not a fan.
But if that's the best he has to offer, it doesn't bode well for everything else. What makes it even worse is that other people are funnier than him, like Rodan. He has some brilliant lines, like,
check this out. What are you buying? Heard that in a game once. demon lets me read minds, you're thinking, shut up and take my halos. Let's do it. Seriously, at this point, do I really need to explain how the damn shop works?
The other role Enzo has is as informant. At the start of B1 he tells you there's dodgy dealings in the black market somewhere, which is possibly the right eye you're looking for, and in B2 it's his plane that enables you to get to Nuatun, the town near Fimbulventer. If they focused more on this aspect he would have been a much better character. Luckily he only appears in the intro and ending, and even then he seems to have less screen time in B2 than he did in B1, so his annoying comedy isn't as annoying. As sweet as Cereza is, I prefer Loki as a character. Luca and Jean are pretty similar in both. Rodin was cool in B1, but is even cooler in B2, and Enzo, while not great in either, doesn't seem to be in B2 as much as B1, so I guess there's that to be thankful for. All in all, point goes to Bayonetta 2. The last proper category is the combat. It's pretty much the same in both games, but what weapons are available vary. You can equip weapons to your hands and feet, and depending what weapons you have equipped where affects what combos you can pull off. I played both games twice, the first on an easy setting just to play through it, and then again on normal to record the footage. In my first run through of B1, I tended to use the whip as it had decent range and worked well against pretty much everything. It wasn't very powerful, but as it was on an easy setting, there wasn't much of a problem. When I went on to normal, the whip was okay, but I ended up using some claws as they were quick, great combos and could deal some impressive damage, which was a godsend for some of the harder battles. It's these claws that cause Bayonetta to have the cat ears and tail during cutscenes. Essentially, you have a punch and kick button and you use them in tangent with each other to pull off the combos. Some weapons have unique abilities, like the claws having a charged explosion. B2 had the same battle system but with different weapons on offer. My main weapons for the first time round was a pair of swords in the hands and whips on the feet. They worked great together, had some amazing combos and generally kicked ass. When I did the game again, I stuck with them, they were awesome. I tried some other weapons, I really did, and while they had some benefits to them or just looked cool, I loved the swords and whips, so I ended up using them once again and they ruled. As you travel around in both games, you find LPs which Rodin uses to draw in demons, kills them and then turns them into new weapons, which is another reason why I want a spin-off game for him, but so far I haven't been able to find them all.
No matter how much you ask, I'm not putting a chainsaw on your arm. So what do you want?
As you annihilate your enemies, you build up magic, indicated by the purple circles in the top left corner, which are used for torture attacks. Which one you use is set depending on the enemy it's used against. Most are an instant death for the poor sod caught in it, but the stronger enemies tend to have a large chunk of their health taken off instead. That isn't always the case though, so there can be times a badass difficult enemy that could deliver an intense battle is defeated in 5 seconds. Both games utilise the mechanic, and some of the torture attacks can be rather nasty. B2 adds an Umbran Climax where, rather than using a torture attack, you can use magic to improve your weapon's abilities, giving it more range, power and summoning an infernal demon to make that attack much more awesome. Occasionally, angels have weapons you can pick up and use. Some are okay, but for the most part they aren't especially effective and don't last long before breaking, so you're probably better off not bothering unless you come across one you actually like using. It's difficult to choose which one deserves the points, but B2 just about gets in there. As much as I liked the weapons I was using in B1, I enjoyed the sword and whip combination much more, and the Umbran Climax added that little bit extra to it. Both games had some absolutely epic fights and kind of reminded me of Pandora's Tower. I haven't played Devil May Cry. Although B2 has won all 3 points awarded so far, B1 still did all 3 areas well.
Bugger. And I didn't make any time for pillow talk.
They were the only proper categories I could think of for the point distribution, so from here on it's going to be odd points for the little things each game does, so things might get a tad random. One thing I haven't delved into yet is the Climax ability. After an epic battle against one of the tougher enemies, such as the 2 high tier angels I mentioned earlier, Bayonetta summons one of several infernal demons to proper destroy them, and it can be rather gruesome. You have to button mash to build up strength, and while the poor angel involved will be destroyed anyway, the more power you give it, the higher your bonus. Both games do it, and they both do it rather well, but B1 seems to be a bit tougher at getting the max bonus, so not only is it more tense as you mash the button, but it's also more rewarding when you achieve it, so B1 can have a point for that. Each game is divided into chapters, and as we saw earlier, B1 has you being placed around the map depending where you're going, whereas B2 has a line of Loki's cards. At the end of each chapter you get a grade: platinum, gold, silver, bronze or stone. When I first played the games I didn't do too badly, but playing the games on normal was a different matter. B1 had a good difficulty curve, starting off as a bit of a challenge but generally bearable and becoming more and more difficult as the game progressed, as you'd expect. B2 however is a bit more all over the place. It starts off okay, maybe even a tad easy, though that was mainly because, unlike with B1, the health and magic increases I acquired from the previous playthrough carried over. Then all of a sudden it went to hell. Literally.
You're probably the only person on the planet who says go to hell and means take me there.
When travelling through hell to save Jean, the difficulty massively increased. I died a fair amount of times in B1, but in this section of B2 I died a hell of a lot, 5 or 6 times in some sections. It was ridiculous and I absolutely sucked. Then we came out of hell and I was doing okay again. Not amazing, mostly bronze, but after the run of stone I had, I was pretty happy with just bronze. In terms of difficulty, B1 got it right, having a nice difficulty curve as you progress, rather than going up and down more than a whore's knickers, so point to B1. Also, at the end of each chapter in B1, you get to play a little game called Angel Attack, where you shoot angels to score points, which you can then use to buy items or convert them into halos. Not only is it a fun minigame, but it's a great way to earn some extra halos, especially with how many trinkets, techniques and costumes there are to buy, so it's a huge shame B2 doesn't have it. I guess B1 deserves a point for that. One other thing that B1 has that B2 doesn't are those bucking fasted quick time events. They're a pain in the ass and pop out of nowhere. There's very little consistency, as you'll fail at one that randomly appeared, while in other places stuff will happen and you'll be expecting one to appear, but it doesn't. So it's not like you can relax and go,
Oh, good cutscene and quick swig of the tea. Why don't you just...
I'm not going to give a point to B2 for not having them, but I will take a point off B1 for having them. Sod it, 2 points. Hate those things. Both games have challenges dotted around the area, which usually involves defeating enemies, but there's an extra requirement like not getting hit, a time limit, or not touching the floor. Some of them are really tough, even when you know the best tactic to accomplish it. You're usually rewarded with items that extend your health or magic. Oh yeah, by the way, there are items you can collect that extend your health and magic. There are also witch tombs to find, which also give you items. B2 has ones where, ironically, you need to collect the pieces of the tomb to restore it back together before being able to break it apart and get the item. Both games also have 5 post-game lost chapters, which are an absolute cock-end to defeat. I haven't completed either of them, but the reward is a new playable character, a demon thing in B1 and Boulder in B2, so maybe one day. There's very little difference between these two aspects of the games, so no points awarded on this occasion. Some reviews I've seen of the games mention high-octane fights during cutscenes that make you wish you were able to get in on the battle and have that much fun beating the enemy to a pulp rather than just sitting back and watching. For me though, the fights were so awesome, I thoroughly enjoyed watching them, so didn't mind taking a back seat every now and then to enjoy the spectacle of it. Thing is, as we've already seen, not all cutscenes were done like this. Both games have instances of still images being flicked between, but they differ on how they present them. B1 has a film reel with each section of the reel being a different picture to display. B2 has a clock with the hand swiping over it to display the next picture. Some scenes are okay being done as still images, but others would have been much better off being proper video cutscenes, especially with what the scenes seem to be trying to portray. While I prefer it if all cutscenes were videos, of the two ways of flicking between images, the clock from B2 is the lesser of the evils, so it can have a point for that.
Not just be a one-trick pony.
As I mentioned earlier, there are loads of things to buy from Rodin, such as weapons, techniques and healing items. You can try a technique out before you buy it, which is great, and there are a fair few of them. There are also trinkets you can buy which have various effects, but most of the techniques and trinkets I didn't bother with, though that's probably why I failed so much. There are also loads of costumes, and some have awesome effects, like the Link costume turning the katana into a master sword and changing some of the sound effects to those from the Zelda series.
You've been naughty.
The Princess Peach and Daisy costumes make it so you summon Bowser's arms and legs during the Wicked Weaves. Possibly the best change though occurs in B2. There's a section where you're on a plane flying to an island and you shoot angels and demons as you go along, but if you don the Fox McCloud costume, not only do Bayonetta's guns change to R-wings, but the plane you're on becomes one as well. You shoot the classic green lasers and bombs, which makes that section so much more entertaining. Aside from the costumes, there isn't much else to spend your halos on, but B2 has a strange token thing you can give to Rodin. I have no idea what it does, but I really want to buy it. While both games have almost identical purchases, B2 has a few extra goodies and side effects up its sleeve, so it gets a point for that. It's probably clear now which of the games is going to win, but the last part is the extra stuff, you know, the other things to find, do and unlock. First, the identical. B1 has notes left by Antonio before he died regarding his investigations into the Lumen Sages and Umber Witches, whereas B2 has notes left by Luca on his investigations into Aesir and the creation of the world as we know it. You can also get info on all the people, angels, demons and other things you come across, which is amazing. I've mentioned in other videos I like finding and reading files like these, but with both Bayonetta games, the files can be rather long and there are a lot of them. They still make good reading, but you won't be judged for not bothering. The Umbran Tears of Blood are a bit pointless. You have various achievements and challenges known as bewitchments to complete, and each one awards you one tier. There are crows dotted around the place, and grabbing the crow also awards you with a tier. In both games, collecting the tiers allows you to purchase the Climax brace, which I don't have, but apparently it makes you mega powerful, but your scores on each stage are not recorded, and seeing as some bewitchments and crows can only be attained on certain difficulties, including the most difficult setting, it's essentially a case of getting something to make you ultra powerful after you pretty much proved you don't need it, so once the novelty wears off, it's kinda useless. The main thing B2 has over B1 in this category is the online-only multiplayer mode Tag Climax. As you play through the main game, you're awarded cards which are used in Tag Climax. Each card is a challenge and you have to complete 6 of them. You only get halos for winning, but I guess it's nice to have the option available to play with people online. Well, I tend to stick to a computer-controlled teammate because people are always a massive disappointment. There's not much in it for this category, but I suppose due to the extra stuff that makes replaying the game more worthwhile, and having a few extra things available, the point goes to Bayonetta 2.
When I finished both games, I knew straight away which one I preferred, but that's not to say that it's miles better. I do prefer Bayonetta 2, but Bayonetta 1 does things well, it's just that Bayonetta 2 does them better. Granted, there are a few things that Bayonetta 1 does better than Bayonetta 2, or has good things that Bayonetta 2 doesn't, but it's the more important things that Bayonetta 2 does better that make it the superior game. See you next time.